Welcome to another edition of Newsline, coming to you live and direct from our Newsfirst studios here in Colombo. For us here in Sri Lanka, for all of us here in Sri Lanka, these are very, very trying times. And the political atmosphere in Sri Lanka, because of these trying times, are extremely turbulent. We see many protests taking place in Sri Lanka. We see many strong policy decisions that some don't have really the approval of the general public being implemented in the country. To discuss all of these and more, we have former parliamentarian and member of the Mount Lavinia Municipal Council, Councillor Kesaralal Gunasekara. A very good evening, sir, and welcome to the show.
Good evening, Sharon.
Mr. Gunasekara, you're here as a member of the government, of course, just to clarify these matters to the public.
Oh yes, part of the government.
But of course you are from the Sri Lanka Freedom Party, and your party were among, I believe, the 11 political parties that formed or constituted the People's Council, as they call it.
Correct.
However, there weren't too many people. It was more of a politicians' council, if you ask me. But nitty-gritties aside, Mr. Gunasekara, there are many policy decisions that the Sri Lanka Freedom Party does not agree with in the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna. Now, if memory serves me correct, the Sri Lanka Freedom Party was also a part of the previous government with the Yahapalne government. You were, or your party, moreover, was a part of that government, and President Maithripala Sirisena, former President Maithripala Sirisena, the leader of your party, said, they didn't work with the policies of the Sri Lanka Freedom Party, but at no point was there a separation, or at least the separation came a little bit too late. But this time around you have come out, but you've not really come out. What is the Sri Lanka Freedom Party planning on doing regarding at least the decisions of the government that your party doesn't agree with, starting from the sale of the Yugadanavi power plant and the LNG agreement, also the decision to ban chemical fertilizers in the country?
Well, the issue is very simple. You got to understand, when you have a setup consisting, or a government consisting of several parties, when I say there are almost 11 or 12 parties involved, it is not that easy to get the consent and agreement and concurrence of all parties, all partners concerned. Many will always have various views, differing views, etc. In that context, yes, we have opposed a couple of decisions that the government has taken, but of course we have done it in a diplomatic manner. We have indicated to the government that we are not too happy with certain. Of course, our secretary himself has made certain statements. The president has made certain statements that they are not happy with certain decisions that the government has taken. But that is always there in a government of this nature. You got to expect that. But
although the Prime Minister at the anniversary celebrations of the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna was very accommodative and very respectful for these affiliated parties of the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna, or the alliance that has formed the government, members of the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna are of a different opinion. They say that there is this concept called collective responsibility of government, and as such, any criticisms of government decisions must come within the cabinet meeting, within the cabinet, and not outside on the streets for the whole world to see. On that front, what is your take?
Well, as far as cabinet responsibility is concerned, I agree to some degree that whatever opposition you have to raise it in cabinet. But the question is, not all members of the SLFP are members of the cabinet. Therefore, certain concerns of members of parliament can be said, but as long as you raise it in a diplomatic manner, as long as you say things that you want to say without upsetting the government in operation. I mean, I still feel that we have been doing that. We have been voicing our opinion on various issues, which is a must in a democracy. I mean, democracy is not where everybody agrees. There are certain parties who will obviously say we are not in agreement.
But we need to move forward from a principled approach to this matter, because while it's true and right that Sri Lanka is a democracy, what's happening in the country right now is affecting the very lives of every citizen in Sri Lanka. Well, unfortunately, maybe the disconnect is in the fact that it's not affecting the lives of the ruling class or the well-to-do of this country as much as it is affecting the people, the poorest of the poorest, with the pandemic hitting, and but then this whole decision to convert from chemical fertilizer to organic fertilizer. Now, on this front alone, there are reports now coming in of the initial results of this massive policy decision. For example, today there were reports that we aired where farmers came and said that previously they used to load about 1,000 kilos of beans and carrots and beetroot, but now they're only getting about 200 to 300 metric tons. Such a huge reduction in the production of these vegetables that feed the general public, which in turn results in higher prices for all of these. Now, the case for organic fertilizer is, of course, a slim one, because nowhere in the world has a country transitioned from chemical fertilizer to 100% organic fertilizer. So, on this front alone, I mean, President Maithripala Sirisena is from the Polonnaruwa district, which is full of farmers. Why haven't you been able to deliver to these constituents from the leader of your party itself?
Well, he himself has said that he is unable to go to Polonnaruwa because of the farmers are agitating and telling him, look here, we need the fertilizer. So this is something that the government needs to see, you know. That's why I said the government, I don't think, is understanding the general views of the public and the farmers. If they do not take that into consideration, they will have so many problems in time to come, because these are not issues that you can sweep under the carpet. You got to understand, you will have to meet them, because these are people who are getting onto the road. I mean, I don't know, I mean, these people are really agitating on the road. It's not that easy. So in order to tackle this situation, somebody will have to sit with at least a farmer associations and discuss as to what we can do. We cannot be rigid on certain decisions that we have taken. You can't, because when the farmers start protesting, you cannot be rigid. You have to change. You got to understand that you need to change.
But on this policy decision alone, there was not too much discussion, as I recall, on the conversion. There were presidential task forces that were appointed with about 40 members, which has not delivered a report until date. Is the Sri Lanka Freedom Party, as a member of the government, in possession of any literature, any academic work, any research that has been done on the possibility of converting to 100% organic fertilizer? Or is this a test for the entire country? Are we saying, you know, let's just try this out and see how it works? What's the worst that could happen? A few people will starve and die. Which is it?
Well, the question is this, you know, I think one or two ministers have mentioned that and say, okay, we'll try this out. If by chance we fail, we revert back to the original. But then that is not the answer. You got to understand, you cannot move into that area. You have to ensure that our food security is protected. In order to do that, you must ensure that there is production. If you feel that there is no production, then you have to change. So the question here is, I don't know as to whether, now the experts have spoken, the specialists have spoken, they have come on national television, they have come on various television programs and said, look here, this is not something that you can do overnight. Phase out operation, yes, possible, but that too, it's only a particular percentage. You cannot go 100% organic.
But the president is of the opinion that these are not real specialists, they are so-called specialists. Is your party, or are you in agreement with that?
No, the question is this, you got to understand, you should not speak like that, because if the specialists come and do speak, it is for the country. I mean, we have a problem. We need to understand that if you have to move forward, we need the advice of specialists. All governments have to understand that. Whether it is this government or previous government, everybody has to understand. If the specialists don't advise us, where are we going? It's the specialists who know the subject. We don't know the subject at all, to be very frank. We can say what we pick from various people, but the specialists understand it very well. So therefore, they are very essential in any government. whether it is this country or any other country, it's a specialist who run, who is a specialist who advise.
Mr. Gunasekara, now your constituency, the Mount Lavinia constituency, I don't think there are too many farmers there, are there?
No. But there is a handful, yes.
There is a handful.
There is a handful, yes.
What is their response?
No, they are fundamentally, what they say is they need fertilizer. There is no question about that. They need. So, but of course the numbers are very small, therefore I don't think they will start protesting and things like that. But they have fundamentally told us that they need.
But even on the implementation of this massive policy decision now, why this is important to every Sri Lankan is it's pretty obvious, because the food that we produce is the food that we eat, and also given the forex reserves crisis that Sri Lanka is facing right now, it's highly unlikely that we will be able to import the deficit of food, if there is such, in the future from overseas. But even 100% organic, now initially that was the plan, 100% organic fertilizer. For to be classified as an organic fertilizer, as far as my knowledge goes, you need carbon components in the fertilizer. But there was potassium chloride brought down to Sri Lanka. Now this is not organic. Then the government shifted their stance towards, they said, green agriculture. So is this a policy inconsistency of the government as well?
No, I think they realize that their original decision needs a shift. As to how they're going to do that, I don't know. But they need to shift, because you cannot stick on to that original decision. You have to change, because if the farmers are getting onto the streets, if the farmers are agitating, and if political parties are agitating, and some of the members of the SLPP are saying, look here, there are certain things that we have to readjust and recheck, then in that case you'll have to adjust. So as to how far you're going to adjust and when you're going to adjust, it's left to be seen, but they need to do that.
On these decisions that the government takes, don't you think that the discussions, the dissent and the criticism of these decisions should come before the decision is taken and not after the decision is taken and the implementation process is already underway?
You're right, provided that the discussions took place with all parties concerned. If that did not take place, then in that case that's an issue. So whoever who's running the show needs to understand that we say a ministry. The minister needs to understand that he has consulted all parties concerned before he decides. If he has not consulted all parties, then in that case that's the fault of the minister.
Well, one final question before we cross over to a short commercial break. The Sri Lanka Freedom Party has been critical of a number of decisions of this government, starting from the East Container Terminal issue, then to the Yugadanavi power plant, the investigations into the Easter Sunday attack, then also the I beg your pardon, the fertilizer issue also. How many more chances is the party willing to give this government a go until you walk out, like what you did?
No, the question is not giving chances to the government. It's a question of negotiating with them as to what is the best way forward. I mean, the government may come out with so many ideas and decisions, and this SLFP will invariably come out with their counter proposals and say, look, this is not good enough, and therefore you need to change and adjust. So it all depends on that. I don't think it's a question of a hammer army. It's not a question of a fight or something like that. But we need to prevail upon them that when things need to be changed, they have to change. If they don't change, they are in trouble. I mean, the whole country is in trouble then, if that is the situation.
Well, we'll cross over to a short commercial break and continue our discussion with Mr. Kesaralal Gunasekara, former parliamentarian and member of the Mount Lavinia Municipal Council, after this short commercial break. Don't go anywhere. You're watching Newsline.
Newsfirst, Newsline.
Welcome back. You're watching Newsline live, coming to you, of course, live and direct from our Newsfirst studios here in Colombo. We're in discussion with Mr. Kesaralal Gunasekara, former parliamentarian and member of the Mount Lavinia Municipal Council. Mr. Gunasekara, the people are still waiting for a voice, a proper voice for them in Parliament, within the cabinet. With the number of issues that Sri Lankans face increasing on a daily basis, of course, when it comes to the next election, be it a general election, a provincial council election, or a presidential election, this government will have to bear responsibility for what they've done. Now, at the end of the day, do you think the Sri Lanka Freedom Party will maybe move out of the government and say, no, this is not us, this was the Sri Lanka Freedom Party? Because if memory serves me right, that's kind of what happened the last time. Think it's going to be a repeat?
No, the question is this. I feel that the Sri Lanka Freedom Party will keep on telling the government or the SLPP that there are certain things that they need to adjust. There are certain things that they need to relook and change their decisions. But if that does not happen, then in that case, the going is not going to be smooth. The going is going to be pretty rough. As to what is going to happen, I don't know. But at the moment, I must be very frank, there has not been any discussion as far as the Sri Lanka Freedom Party is concerned of moving out. I mean, even at the last Central Committee meeting, there was, of course, voices were there.
Mr. Gunasekara, do you think that the government or the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna or the executive, the legislature, is not listening to the Sri Lanka Freedom Party? Do you think they're listening enough to your party?
Well, outside, if you sit outside and look at it, yes, you may get the idea or give me the feeling that the SLPP is not listening to the SLFP, but I don't think so. Because
but what have they listened to you
No,
on?
because on certain issues they have had discussions with the president as well.
And what has been the outcome?
I mean,
listening to you, not in the sense that lending my ear to you, but listening and taking your advice, taking the advice.
That's a discussion. Listening is followed with a discussion. Now, as to what finally the outcome is left to be seen. But the decisions will go on. I mean, you keep on, that's what I always say, keep on knocking at the door, because one fine day the door is going to open. So you have to prevail upon.
But the Sri Lanka Freedom Party kept knocking on the door during the Yahapalne government. That door never opened.
Yeah, there were different reasons for that. There were different reasons for that.
What's to stop me from assuming that you will come down the line on this show 5 years later maybe and say there were different reasons for this as well?
No, the question is this. You need to understand that whether it is SLPP or SLFP, both are fundamentally the origin is SLFP. It was not like the Yahapalne administration. Fundamentally, the origin is SLFP.
So then, what's the policy inconsistency?
SLPP says that they have a different party. Their origin is also SLFP.
But then why the inconsistency here? Why the separation? Why the division? If the policies are the same, if the origin is the same, then why is there a difference?
No, the question, it all depends on leaders, I mean, the way Mahinda Rajapaksa acts and decides, the way Gotabaya Rajapaksa acts and decides are totally different.
What's the difference?
No, it could be different because the question is this now. If Mahinda Rajapaksa decides on a particular, it may be his operation would have been totally different to that of the current president. Now the president says, look, here I stand by my manifesto which I put forward at the election. That's it. So
but the manifesto that the president put forward at the election, specifically on this fertilizer issue, since we've been talking about it, it said
10 years.
10 years. It said 10 years. I mean, when you say I stand by the manifesto, you can't eliminate an important phrase like that.
Yeah, I know. But then the question is this: now we do not know as to how far we can go on in this matter, because we need to change, whether we like it or not. As I said before, I have said it on a different program as well. One day we have to change, because that is what is required.
When you say we have to change, you mean the
government has to change.
The government has to change.
When I say government, the policy of the government has to change.
The policy of the government.
I'm not referring to the government. The policy with regard to fertilizer of the present government will have to change.
But where was this opposition before this decision was implemented? We did not see the Sri Lanka Freedom Party coming out and saying, look, this is a bad decision, this is a wrong decision. Even Minister Mahinda Amaravira, he is the Minister of Environment, and he didn't utter a word.
No, but there were various at various stages of the Central Committee, these were issued, raised.
I mean, if your party is so hell-bent against this decision, and that this will, destroy the country, it will destroy the farmers. Your leader is saying he can't go to his constituency because farmers are agitating, demanding for fertilizer. Where was this opposition before this decision was made?
No, the opposition is always there.
It was there?
The opposition was always there. And that's why most of the backbenchers of the SLPP were criticizing the SLFP as well. That was there. But the question is this: you have to understand, it's a different scenario altogether, the way you have to do certain things, etc. We need to understand that we are not a very, very strong force in the government, We have only 13 members of parliament. So we had to act accordingly. But at all stages, we have prevailed upon the SLPP that there are certain things that we need to change and adjust. And I feel that they will have to do that adjustment.
But while all of this is taking place, Mr. Gunasekara, it's the poor of this country that are suffering.
Of course, I know that.
That are suffering.
I have mentioned that
I come from a middle class family, and I must tell you that I am feeling this change. I am feeling the change. And if I am feeling the change, as lucky as I am to have a roof over my head and 3 meals a day, what is the plight?
I know, because some of the ministers themselves have come out openly and said, look, the cost of living is going up, it is skyrocketing, all those things they have said. So they need to understand, they have to sit back and discuss as to how they are going to take care of the poorest of the poor. That is very, very crucial. I have said this over and over again. If those people are not being looked after, protected and covered up, then in that case we will have a lot of problems.
But Mr. Gunasekara, besides the adversities that the people are facing, of course, if we all band together, we can come out of this. We as Sri Lankans have hope, and I believe our cricket team is one of the best examples for that. Even through the toughest of storms, we can pull through and startle or surprise everybody. But the real problem here is the fact that we've always been taught when we were children that leaders lead by example. And that is not really happening here. It's very frustrating when we see people like the General Secretary, no less than the General Secretary of the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna, coming out just a few weeks or maybe a month ago, coming out and saying we are moving forward with the next project that will develop Sri Lanka, and that is to bring down vehicles for parliamentarians.
No, but I think what he mentioned was that we have to take this country forward. We need acceleration as far as development is concerned, and for that purpose, members of parliament need vehicles.
Need vehicles.
That's what he said.
So I mean, the entire country is going through such a tough time. We've had this discussion before. There were letters of credit opened. There was a huge controversy, and when leaders of our country, the General Secretary of the governing faction comes out and say this, what do you think the people might be thinking? I mean, people have to stand in line to buy kerosene oil, gas, essential goods.
Correct.
And parliamentarians are complaining that they don't have vehicles. They already have 2, 3, they just want 4, 5.
No, the question is this, you have to understand, if I have been in this political structure since 1978, and I observe all these things. You got to understand, you cannot be a member of parliament unless you know your subject, unless you know your laws. I mean, if you don't know most of those things, you cannot be a member of parliament. What has happened to the present parliament is, present parliament consists of so many people who are not conversant with laws of this country, who are not conversed with so many rulings, etc., given by ministries, etc. So in that context, it's not that easy for them to take this country forward. They need to understand that. Parties need to understand they need educated people in parliament.
Mr. Gunasekara,
we are not doing that.
Said that you've been in the political sphere in Sri Lanka since the 1970s. Reminds me of the statement made by, I believe, Uday Gamanpila and Vimal Veeravansa, who at the People's Council meeting that they held, they said this government is more corrupt than the government of J.R. Jayawardena, the previous governments. They said, those governments were corrupt, but this government is even more corrupt. is the Sri Lanka Freedom Party of that stance?
Oh, obviously no. I mean, if they said, they themselves said that, that is obvious. I don't have to confirm that.
So, do you say that the Sri Lanka Freedom Party is a part of a corrupt government?
I don't say Sri Lanka Freedom Party is part of a corrupt government.
But if this government is, if you're conceding to the fact that this government is corrupt.
No, the question is, if members of parliament come out, ministers come out openly and say that the government is corrupt, then there is nothing that we can say about it. There's nothing that we can say about it other than to agree. What else can we say? I'm surely if they themselves come and say that this government is corrupt.
So I'm just piecing this together. You're saying that you agree to the fact that this government is the most corrupt.
It's not worth piecing.
And it's a fact that the Sri Lanka Freedom Party is a part of this government. So 1 + 1 = 2, meaning the Sri Lanka Freedom Party is part of the most corrupt government in the history of Sri Lanka?
No, the question is this. Ministers have said that things appear that the corruption, gigantic corruption that is taking place is huge and that surpasses all previous governments. So the question is, they themselves are saying it.
Political satire in Sri Lanka has been growing to reaching new heights, and this reminds me of something that I saw on social media when ministers come out and say, you know, this government is corrupt, this corruption is taking place, there's a mafia in this country, this is a mafia, there's a gas mafia, there's a power mafia. But this was in Sinhala when an innocent onlooker is saying, "Ha, api mona hari karanna." When these ministers make these statements, what do they expect the people to do?
I don't think they expect anything from the people, but that shows very clearly within the government lines that a lot of people are not happy at all with regard to what is going on in the country. That is a message. And that is a message that the leaders of the ruling party will have to take into, they will have to recognize. You know, that is very important. They need to understand that it is not outsiders who are criticizing. Members of their own group are coming out with statements.
Mr. Kesaralal Gunasekara, thank you very much for coming on our show and, of course, being critical of these matters and standing your ground. But, of course, many of our viewers are of the view that you should take these matters up not during a public interview, but with the leaders of this country themselves, because you, as an elected member of a local government body, have access to these leaders, access that other people do not have. And your stance here must be communicated to the leaders. And you need to, of course, work on convincing them to make a better life.
That's why I talk like this. I mean, wherever I go, I always say, look here, barring anything else, I always say, if the government is wrong, the government is wrong. And if changes are to be made, I always say changes need to be made. And
we hope and pray that, of course, you will be able to persuade or dissuade this government from doing certain things. Thank you very much to all our viewers out there for tuning in to another edition of Newsline. We will continue as usual tomorrow as well until we meet again. Take care and God bless.